Today's agenda is quite brief, but before we begin, we've also seen what happens to our competitors, to those leaders in the industry, when due diligence efforts fall short. In addition to tainting a company's reputation, bad actions of a third party can lead to anything from a criminal investigation to hobbled business operations and even hefty fines that could haunt a company for years. And in most instances, people always ask, well, how could I have seen that coming? How could I have seen the risk signs sooner? Today's agenda will go through what we know as LexisDiligence, a single source of trusted, credible news and business information, improving your ability to conduct thorough due diligence quickly. We'll also talk about a customizable report builder that's included in the tool, which enables you to share critical information with stakeholders across the enterprise and maintain an audit trail of your due diligence efforts. And we will round out our session today with an alerting tool that helps in driving awareness so that you can take proactive steps into managing risk. A single source of trusted, credible news and business information. Due diligence is more than just a quick check of public records, sanctions, or negative news. It's about developing a complete understanding of your business partners. Because LexisDiligence covers thousands of databases, mostly with a single search, we can't elaborate on all of the individual sources here today, but this overview will highlight key categories of information on what's covered and why it matters to your due diligence process. So what's covered and why does it matter? Over 26,000 global news sources are offered through LexisDiligence, and those come in the form of newspapers, news wires, press releases, and more. Regulators have commented on the inclusion of adverse news searches as part of an enhanced or complete due diligence program. With LexisNexis global and comprehensive news coverage and some sources spanning back more than 40 years, users can identify whether there's an ongoing pattern of negative activity that is to be considered. There's an inclusion of adverse news as part of a complete due diligence program. There are also offerings that are available not only in English, but in non-English language. So if we are searching against the words, let's say fraud or bankruptcy, those terms will be converted through the Google translating component through LexisDiligence into the natural language of that particular regional source. What's covered and why it matters? Company reports, including D&B Global Profiles, cover more than 400 databases, offering coverage for more than 200 million public and private companies. And those are not just domestic. We span more than 220 countries in our offering for developed and emerging markets. So why is that important? We find that most of the competitors of LexisDiligence offer a single slice or a limited number of sources as a publisher of data. As you can see, 400 databases of varying company reports brings a collection into play here that you might not find with other competitors. The second thing of why it matters is corporate history tells us if a company has changed names. Oftentimes, we will find companies that have come back into a business setting with a different name, a different set of principles, but the address might be the same. So we would want to indicate those changes to you so that your research could include former names as well. If you're doing any sort of global business, global locations can tell if a company has operations in high or riskier parts of the world. So if there is a greater propensity to bribery, we can certainly recommend enhanced due diligence with LexisDiligence. Let's say that you're not in procurement or supply chain, but you're in a motion to look at acquisitions or you're screening potential alliances for another purpose. It's important to understand not only that target's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, but if there's any sort of conflict of interest that would be presented to your organization. And lastly, with LexisDiligence, not only can we perform company research, we can also identify key officers with the organization and perform background checks on those organizations and their principals before moving forward with a signed contract or a deal. What else is covered and why it matters? Sanctions and watch list is presented through LexisDiligence, and it covers more than 800 different watch lists in more than 75 countries, and they're translated from the multiple languages. If you are looking to sequester any sort of reputational damage, or you're looking at subjects that might have been subject to monetary penalties, civil suits, any sort of enforcement or regulatory actions, these are all distractions that you could uncover with the sanctions and watch list coverage. Sanctions and watch lists also include things like OFAC, watch lists, blacklists, disqualified or debarred persons and organizations. Content in sanctions and watch lists is crucial. We also look at the changing regulatory landscape throughout the world, and whether that is something with the impact of Dodd-Frank or the FCPA or the UK Bribery Act, or now even the Modern Slavery Act, those regulations are changing, and they impact not only regulated industries, but also non-regulated ones as well. So what else is covered and why else does it matter in LexisDiligence? We couple adverse filings with politically exposed people as well. There's a global offering of PEP of 1.4 million profiles, not only including the politically exposed person, but their family members and their close associates as well. If someone is found to be on the PEP list, they serve or have served in a prominent public function. And with that prominent placement, they are closely tied to the influence, the regulatory or the legislative intention of a particularly held state institution. And not that it states that that person would be involved in corrupt activity, including bribery, but the propensity is a bit higher with those on the PEP list. Countries around the world are tightening anti-bribery laws in an effort to combat corruption. So when we start looking at the greater emphasis that's placed from the regulatory bodies, there is a higher degree of due diligence which needs to be performed on principals and or entities that you could be engaging in business. Failure to perform adequate due diligence could certainly expose you to reputational damage, multi-million-dollar fines, and certainly vast legal costs. So what else is covered and why does it matter? LexisDiligence includes biographical sources, resume-like data including dates of birth, relatives, marital history, and hobbies, but also career history, employment background, board memberships, compensation, even civic or philanthropic organizations will also be included. So why is it inclusive that we include, why is it important that we include biographical sources? Most likely, especially for small or private companies, we must look to the reliability of the principals, and any sort of experience or personal history of key employees, key managers, could certainly have a big influence on the risks involved in doing business with that particular entity. When performing due diligence searches on people, it is important to understand their background and biographical details that are not often self-reported, but come through various sources, hundreds of sources, Martindale-Hubbell, Standard & Poor's, Who's Who, Marquise. It helps us look at the position and successful function within a role. The last thing to consider with biographical sources is educational history. Certainly we would not want to do business with those who have falsified their interest, falsified their resumes, or any sort of self-reported data that we might have called upon at the insistence of a RFP or any other sort of onboarding assessment. You might have a question here about all of this data, and is there a footprint that is left? In LexisDiligence, there is no footprint of inquiry left on any subject matter, whether it's a company or whether it's an entity like a person or a board of director. So what else is covered and why does it matter? Well, legal, where LexisNexis got its footprint more than 40 years ago, is an important source for due diligence. Why would it be important to pull legal documents if I'm not in the legal department? Well, it might indicate to us any sort of pending litigation that this target company might be facing. Not only do we have legal information from the U.S., there's a vital performance of legal information that we provide in global as well. Dockets are available to us for federal and state courts to include pending legal matters, but also we can look throughout the legal documentation to see if there is any sort of pattern of breach of contract or labor and employment issues. Have there been settlements out of court? Those distractions are certainly coming off the bottom line of any company that you might be contemplating doing business with. If they're settling out of court for 6, 7 figures, money has to come from somewhere. And certainly that could then trickle down to the closing of plants, the laying off of a workforce, or even product development. So what else is covered and why does it matter? If you're doing business in a regulated industry or you're doing business with potential suppliers in a regulated industry, federal and state agency decisions are important as part of the due diligence process. Government agencies have proceedings that are enforceable for not only statutes, but the regulatory commissions out of those agencies. And they are equally as binding as anything that would have fallen through the course of a legal action in front of a court. If someone has been cited for human trafficking, bribery, conflict minerals, dumping, or other methods, likely the federal and state agencies will pick up on these much and more before something hits the court system. A company that has violated an agency's regulations can certainly be subject to any sort of penalties and also fines and sanctions. What else is covered and why does it matter? Well, jury verdicts. When you're looking at jury verdicts, again, there might be a pattern of history with regard to a particular defendant, and there might be amounts that have been awarded to plaintiffs on behalf of your defendant or third party. Determining those source of funds, we did some research a couple of months ago on an institution that was paying off and bribing officials out of their petty cash. Their petty cash was a substantial 6 figures, and it wasn't until someone checked the jury verdicts and settlements to see where that threshold affected their bottom line and not just an unreported petty cash figure. We also look for other things like consumer fraud, criminal action, any sort of discrimination, maybe even product recalls with intellectual property, and all that can certainly be covered in jury verdicts and settlements. 2 more things. What's covered and why it matters is country reports. Let's say that you're doing business in a global area or a company is doing business in a certain part of the world that appears to be more risky than most. Whether you're performing due diligence on a prospective investment or a business partner, getting the lay of the land and evaluating the risk through not only DMB but also EIU helps us look at the infrastructure of that particular area of the world. It's especially helpful when we need virtual feet on the ground to look at new countries, emerging markets, where there might be a high risk, but an unexposed risk to traditional media and any sort of company reports. Many of our competitors do not provide such context, and that certainly would leave you exposed. Through DMB, the profiles are such that it gives a DMB risk indicator. It does give a 3-year economic look for history, as well as a forecast on economic indicators and socio-political aspects of the country. Through EIU, it covers more in-depth forecasts with regard to a number of industries. We're looking at things like consumption, wages, income levels, infrastructure, and the like. So what's the possibility of bribery taking hold in a certain part of the world if wages aren't commensurate with the traditional workforce there? And lastly, let's take a look at what's covered and why it matters. Comprehensive reports suggest to us 36 billion public records, not only finding names and addresses and phone numbers, but the correlation and the links to other people's locations and businesses as such. A great starting point is to look at something as obvious as a Secretary of State filing, or finding a DBA filing, or looking at various judgments, liens, or connections with a target company or third party that one we've never heard of. So this would be an indicator of further due diligence motion. If we're looking at our comprehensive reports that are surfacing billions and billions of public records, we want to be able to surface red flags for you. We want to be able to look at conflicts of interest or a position where one of the senior middle management individuals associated with an entity might have other allegiances to another company. We also want to look at heads-ups on financial concerns, whether those are bankruptcies, liens, and or judgments. When we're looking at comprehensive public records through LexisDiligence, there is not a date restrictor, nor is there a purge of data. So we find that we're going back decades and looking at everything from business associations, social media contacts, bankruptcies, judgments, liens, and the like. Now, all of that is covered, and why does it matter if we can't take it into a format that is auditable? So LexisDiligence provides what's called Report Builder. And Report Builder enables any of our users to compile documents from across all of these various sources and searches into a single report for delivery. The results can automatically be organized under the entity name that you've searched. So in this example, you'll note at the top of the list or the top of the report there is a date and a time component to that search or to the creation of that report builder. It's also naming the person who conducted the investigation. Lastly, you'll see on the head or the title page the document containing investigations on and the name of the entity that was searched. Any of this is customizable for your work process. It's also co-brandable. So if you are a division of the company that is putting report builders to various audiences throughout your organization, you can add your own JPEG to the top of this, and it could be co-branded with LexisDiligence. It could also be an internal logo or any other file that you consider to be a JPEG or a PNG file. Other examples of the report builder include a navigation tool that is allowing us to look at the various reports in a table of content format. You'll notice that I've added notes to the report builder itself. Under Promontory Financial Group, I added a note, sample report. Under the first document, I summarized in my note alleged assistance provided to Iranian clients and why I've included that negative news story to my end user. I've also added a note to the second document there, parent-subsidiary structure. I've also added another note to Eugene Ludwig, and he's the director. So as we move forward with Report Builder, you will notice that the linking technology serves you well in the combination of either a Word or a PDF format. This does substantiate proof of audit. It does allow us to take notice of documents that would be substantiating our decision to move forward and or not with a particular third party. The last thing to consider about Report Builder is that when we do perform a search, and let's say that we didn't find any sort of sanctions or warnings, the Report Builder allows us to add a placeholder for sanctions and warnings as an example, and it allows us to see that no documents were found. So in this instance, as of April 5th, on this particular time and reference, we would see a placeholder for any documents that we did not surface as part of our due diligence motion, and it could serve our auditors as well. With that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Mark Davis, to talk about the current due diligence and monitoring landscape. Mark?
Thank you, Karen. I appreciate that. We're going to get into a little bit of a live demo here in just a minute, but I wanted to kind of set the stage based on some of the things that Karen was talking about. In today's world, we have companies that are facing a lot of the issues with the customers and their clients that Karen just went through. They know what the risks are. They know what they need to do, but whether it's resources or some other reason, they're just not doing it. Diligence is a great tool when you kind of know where you're going and you want to dig deeper. But there's a lot of companies that aren't ready for that. So they want a complementing tool that will allow them to kind of monitor at a high level what's going on with the entities that they want to monitor. My career, as Uliana had talked about, it's kind of taken me all along the supply chain, and I'm always amazed at even the Fortune 500 level companies, if they're monitoring news on their suppliers or their customers at all, it's usually with a free tool like Google, and some of you on the phone today can probably relate to how that works. You have analysts that will go through, they'll click on searches or save searches in Google, they'll look at the results, and then they either attach those results in a tool like Ariba, or they email them to somebody else to take a look at. The flow that you're looking at here, that Karen is showing you in this slide, is very similar to what I hear all the time customers are doing. Again, they're taking a look at that Google search, they're finding some results, they're copying either the content out or the link out, they're putting it in a Word doc, and then they're attaching it to some sort of tool or emailing to somebody. Next slide. So the problem with this approach and this kind of due diligence and monitoring landscape as it is today is it's a very manual process. Again, as a lot of you on the phone may attest to, it's painful to go through Google searches and basic searches like that. They typically don't combine media types. So if I want to look for content in the social media world, I have to do it separate from my news. And then, of course, even when I get to my news, I'm very limited on the content that free tools like Google can provide me. So there is some online news, but it's not to the width and breadth of what we have and what I'll be showing you today in Newsdesk. The other thing is that there's no built-in workflow. I'm going to show you as we get into this is that it's great if you can find some of these articles, but there's usually no built-in workflow. So once an analyst finds something like that, they aren't always sure what to do with it because a lot of companies really haven't developed formalized processes and what to do. So typically it gets packaged up and it gets emailed to somebody to take a look at. So what we're going to be talking about today is going to change all that. It's going to go a little bit further into some of the different things you can do, being able to search subsets of data, which is one of the things that a lot of analysts struggle with. They will get a result set, and then they want to fine-tune it and get even further into that result set. So we're going to kind of talk about that today. I just wanted to set the stage from where things are, and then as we go forward into the next slide, talk a little bit about where we're at with LexisNexis Newsdesk. This is going to be a tool that, as you'll see in just a minute, where analysts don't have to go through and just click on these save searches. They can get newsletters, they can get alerts, they may have embedded charts on some corporate intranet site that they monitor. They can actually look at the analytics through the Newsdesk dashboard, and then take a look at the searches that they've created under there if they want to. The nice thing is, and you're going to see this in just a minute, there's a really, really nice built-in workflow for how they can be able to take data and move it along the chain. It's also got some kind of a little bit more formalized ways that the management and the upper levels within the company can kind of take a look and see what's going on too and audit the results of what's coming through. As you'll see, the content is rich. We are going to be focusing today a lot on the news content. But we will get in, there is capability to be able to take a look at blogs and other social media across international content all over the world, over 90 languages. So no matter where you're monitoring the news for your suppliers or your entities, we will have a source to be able to help do that. And then finally, again, you'll get to see is that a lot of times when companies have created these Google searches or searches in some other tool, they're usually just looking for an overall mention of the company. And a lot of times that produces so many extra false positive results that if there is a process in place, many times it just goes away because the analyst just takes so much time to go through all these results. What you're going to see in the solution today with Newsdesk is a really, really nice way to be able to package up searches in a way that really focuses on where the risk is, leveraging that LexisNexis political, economic, societal, technical, legal, and environmental risk in their smart indexing in these searches. And be able to provide the managers a way, again, to be able to monitor and audit the process to make sure that, that as a company, you're protected. So where we're going to go today is we're going to take a look at LexisNexis Bluesfest. It is a media monitoring tool that has been positioned to really help companies monitor all types of things. Today, we're going to be talking about monitoring entities in a really easy-to-use, consolidated manner. And we just talked about, I'm going to go ahead and minimize this, we just talked about a situation where we have analysts within the company that are going out, clicking on these news searches, trying to find results. They have to do it one at a time. There's just no easy way. With Newsdesk, analysts would have a couple of different options on the way they would get news delivered to them. One of which is what you're seeing here in a newsletter form, where chemical companies that, as an analyst, I am tracking for my company have been delivered to me. So I have my search results. So for each one of these companies, I can go through and I can click to that place in the newsletter itself. And instead of having to go through and drill down into individual searches, I've had my results of my searches that are very focused only on risk-based events delivered to me, so that I can really get in and dive in and take a look at that content. Now, I may also have within my company, I may have charts and graphs that have been embedded into an intranet portal site. So part of my workflow then could be to come into a tool like this and get my results delivered this way. Instead of through the newsletter, I can kind of follow it throughout the week. If I have any peaks and valleys, if there's something major going on, I can instantly see it and instantly drill down to the result sets of my articles or what are causing those events. Again, this is similar to the process that I would be using if I was using something like Google or some other tool, but it's consolidated and very, very easy for me to get at the data that I need to get at. And finally, I may just have, as part of how I'm set up within my company, I actually may have access to a dashboard that allows me to see all of all the companies that I'm tracking. I can see them over the past 30 days when we have a link that comes up. I can look and see what other hot topics or subjects that are being mentioned along with the companies that I'm monitoring. So I have yet another way to kind of surface up that data so that I don't necessarily have to go through and click through to every single one of the results that I'm tracking. I can get them delivered to me, and when a spike occurs, when something happens that I need to see, it is delivered to me in a way that's really, really easy to use, and I can get right to the data that I need to see. So let's take a look real quick. Oh, sorry, and one of the things that happens when I'm doing a WebEx demo is that I kind of get a little bit crossed up here with my bandwidth. I want to go ahead and switch over real quick. So one of the things that we're taking a look at is the searches themselves. We take a look at when we get these built up, and the LexisNexis customer support team sets up all this for your account when you want to be able to monitor entities that you're interested in. That may be a company, but it also could be instances where I want to look at locations that are critical to maybe my manufacturing or to some other aspect of my business, or even industries. If I want to kind of track and see what's going on with the categories and industries that my customers, my clients, or just entities that I want to take a look at are involved with. All the rules that you will see for these searches have been developed over several years by LexisNexis, looking for content where the entities are showing some sort of risk and some sort of that pestle risk, that either in the political category or environmental, societal, technical, legal, environmental. So in any one of those areas, we are looking for terms where that risk is occurring. So we're doing all that work on behalf of your team in advance. But unlike some of the risk monitoring tools where all the rules can only be slightly adjusted, if they're adjusted at all, Newsdesk has the capability, and we're going to open up a search here that we've kind of got already pre-made. Newsdesk has that capability to give users the mechanisms to be able to refine these searches on their own if they want to. So while we will set these up, it may be that when your team gets in and they begin to start taking a look at the content coming back, they may decide, you know, I only want to see specific sources. I want to go ahead and slightly modify Mansfield Oil to include some other variations of this name. So it's a really nice way for you to be able to take the work that we've done for you, and if you want to tweak it and change it slightly, you can do that. Again, it's something that many tools that offer a solution like this don't necessarily provide. So that don't have that. But now, where are we at? We have a result set here. Sure that Newsdesk has kind of bubbled it up and we've applied the risk factor. There's a lot of new ways to be able to monitor the entities that are easier and maybe a little bit more straightforward than what you're using today. But as an analyst, I'm still kind of left with that challenge of, I've got an article. I see that maybe there's some risk associated with it. I need to get it someplace, but I really don't know what I should be doing with it. If I'm using a tool like Ariba, it's not that big of a deal because I can just kind of get in here and I can copy and paste either the link or the content, but not everybody has one of those tools. In fact, many companies don't have one of those tools. And this is where Newsdesk really takes that next step, the next step of just monitoring news to kind of providing a what next workflow for the users and the management team. And this is really important because as I come into this, and then I see, okay, these are my articles. I'm using a process just like I always used to use with Google, but now instead of being able to just take a look at that and have to do something with that, I can click on my tag, and I can say, yep, this is a Mansfield oil risk. I've got that. If I want to go deeper, I can say this is also a Mansfield critical risk. So now I've marked that in the system for everybody within the account to be able to follow and monitor throughout the system. I can also do the normal things, so I can also place some comments in there and share individual articles if I want. So those capabilities are still there. But I think the important thing is for a monitoring process like that, this to really work, is I have to have something really easy for my analysts when they come in and evaluate the content of a really tight search, where most of the, I know most of these articles really have a risk associated with them, is to give them something simple to come in here. Yes, this is Mansfield oil. I've got it. We've classified this, or this is nothing. I've looked at it and it's not a risk. Now I've got something developed that, as a manager of the process, I can really go and use. So as a manager of this whole process, I can take a look at what my analysts are looking at. I can see, okay, we've got six articles that have been tagged for Mansfield oil. We've got some Calgon Carbon Corporations, Mr. Blaine. So I can see the volume as it's happening. And if I'm an auditor or if I'm a manager, I can now look at these specific tagged articles that my analysts have done and really get down to take a look at what I want to see. So from here, I can see, okay, this is where we're at. These are the articles that are going into that. I can see, oh, yeah, these are definitely things I need to do. And this is important because at the management level, now I have to be able to make decisions based on what I'm seeing. I'm seeing that Mansfield oil, is having a lot of articles that are being tagged for risk. Maybe it's time for me to find a new supplier in this space. Maybe this is a client that I'm doing business with, or a company I'm thinking about buying. And this is the kind of information that now is super critical for me to be able to make some of the decisions as a manager that I want to be able to make. And I think alternatively, this tool, while we're talking about this from a risk perspective, could also be used as a tool that finds positive things. So now I can, as I'm going through and I'm monitoring the entities and the companies that I do business with, I have a whole different set of searches that do nothing but look for positive things. So I can send those over to my marketing team and to the board of directors to say, listen, these are the kinds of companies that we're doing business with. They're doing really great things. And when they do great things, it gets associated to us to be able to do great things. And we can really publish some marketing and advertising around what those are doing. So let's take it back just a little bit here as we take a look at this flow. So what we've done is we've talked about kind of the day in the life of our analysts, where they can get information served up a number of different ways, whether that is through a newsletter, whether that is through an embedded graph someplace on the company's intranet, or through their own view of their dashboard. They will be able to come in and take a look, okay, these are the places that I need to start my day with. These are the spikes that I am seeing. Before I ever drill down and start taking a look at searches, the system is telling me this is where you need to focus your day. And it develops that workflow that will then take me down into the position where I can evaluate yes or no, this is a risk, this is not a risk. I can tag it as such, and then that will flow up through the system to the management team to be able to decide what they want to do with it. It's also something that's very auditable, because now I know what the articles that came through my searches are. I know how many there are. And I also know how many have been evaluated throughout the system, because my analysts are tagging those. So you've got a built-in audit program then you can do reporting on, do searches on to make sure that the team is doing exactly what they need to do. And with that, I will go ahead and close this out. Again, this is a tool that you can use right out of the box. We're looking at all different kinds of news and social media, and again, the intelligence behind the searches is basically being brought over from the supply chain experience that LexisNexis had built into it, so that as a user, I can either change this, or if I want to, I can take the company template of all that intelligence, all the things I'm looking for, and I can create my own brand new search by using the refine field here. So now I can go through and I can say, now I want company ABC, and I can then save this as my brand new search, and I can monitor what I want to monitor independently of what the customer support initially sets up for me. And Karen, I'll go ahead and stop sharing and assign control back over to you.